She was the face of an era, the symbol of rebellion, beauty, and freedom. Brigitte Bardot wasn't just a movie star, she was a cultural phenomenon. With her tousled blonde hair, smoky eyes, and magnetic screen presence, Bardot redefined what it meant to be a woman in the spotlight. In the 1950s and 60s, the world couldn't take its eyes off her. Magazines, directors, and fans followed her every move. She had it all: via fame, influence, and a voice that shaped conversations about femininity and desire. But behind the dazzling lights and endless headlines, something much more complicated was unfolding. As her fame grew, so did the pressure. Bardot became trapped inside an image that the world expected her to live up to, an image she never asked for, and one that began to consume her. She wanted to act, to express, to be free. But instead, she found herself losing control of her career, her narrative, even her own identity. Everyone thought they knew Brigitte Bardot, but very few truly saw her. The woman behind the icon was quietly unraveling, battling the overwhelming weight of public scrutiny and personal pain. This is not just a story about glamour and fame. It's about how the world builds legends and then breaks them. It's about a woman who tried to walk away, only to realize that the world wasn't ready to let her go. What really happened to Brigitte Bardot when the cameras stopped rolling? How did one of the most powerful women in cinema lose control of her own story? Stay with us, because what comes next will change the way you see one of Hollywood's most unforgettable icons. Brigitte Bardot was born in Paris in 1934, long before the world knew her name. She came from a strict, upper-middle-class family, where discipline and control were a way of life. As a young girl, she was quiet, shy, and deeply sensitive. Her dream was never fame, it was ballet. She trained seriously, hoping to join the Paris Opera Ballet. But fate had something else in mind. A single magazine cover at just 15 years old changed everything. Suddenly, she was being noticed not for her talent, but for her beauty. By the time she was in her early 20s, Bardot had become a sensation. Films like And God Created Woman turned her into an overnight international star. She wasn't just acting, she was redefining femininity. To some, she was the symbol of liberation. To others, she was scandalous. But either way, she couldn't be ignored. Directors wanted her. Paparazzi followed her. Audiences obsessed over her every move. She was everywhere, except in control of her own life. The more famous she became, the less say she had over how the world saw her. She was being cast in the same kinds of roles over and over again, seductive, wild, untamed. Producers didn't care about her voice or vision. They wanted the image, the idea of Brigitte Bardot that sold tickets. And while fans adored that version of her, it slowly erased who she really was. She felt trapped in a persona she didn't recognize, one that had nothing to do with the real woman underneath the glamour. Behind the scenes, Bardot was becoming more withdrawn, more fragile. She spoke openly about her discomfort with fame, her struggles with the media, and her growing disillusionment with the film industry. But no one was really listening. The headlines only grew louder. The roles more predictable. And the pressure to remain that perfect, untouchable star never stopped. She tried to push back, to take control. But the world didn't want to let her change. Not when the myth of Brigitte Bardot was more profitable than the truth. So she made a decision, one that would shock the industry, confuse her fans, and leave many wondering what truly happened behind the camera. But the most haunting part? That was still to come. As Brigitte Bardot's career soared through the 1960s, the pressure to maintain her image became unbearable. She was hailed as the ultimate sex symbol, but no one seemed to care about what she wanted or how she felt. Every film, every appearance, every photograph added another layer to the myth. But behind that myth was a woman slowly breaking apart. The constant attention wasn't just exhausting, it was dehumanizing. She couldn't step outside without being mobbed. Journalists wrote about her body more than her performances. Every relationship she had was turned into a scandal. She wasn't seen as a person anymore. She was a fantasy, one that didn't belong to her. Her private life became front-page news. The marriages, the heartbreaks, the rumors, it was all public property. Brigitte tried to find peace in love, but even there, the chaos followed. Each failed relationship became another story for the tabloids. She felt exposed, misunderstood, and powerless to set the record straight. The roles she was being offered felt like copies of copies. She wasn't growing as an artist, she was being recycled as an idea. And every time she tried to speak up or step away, she was accused of being difficult, ungrateful, or unstable. The conflict deepened when she began questioning the values of the industry she once ruled. Bardot became outspoken about her disillusionment with fame, and her desire to leave it all behind. But people didn't want to hear that. They wanted the icon, not the truth. Even those closest to her struggled to understand. She was surrounded by people who benefited from her fame, but few who truly protected her. That isolation only pushed her further into herself. As her career hit its peak, Bardot made a shocking decision: to walk away from acting entirely. At just 39 years old, she left the film industry without apology. The world was stunned. Why would a woman at the height of her fame simply disappear? The media had their theories. Some said she was burned out. Others whispered about emotional breakdowns. But the real reasons, those were much more personal and far more painful. Because even after she left the spotlight, Brigitte Bardot's name remained in the headlines. And the image she had tried so hard to escape? It followed her everywhere. After Brigitte Bardot stepped away from the film industry, many thought she would quietly fade from public life. But the truth was far more complicated. Even though she no longer appeared in movies or walked red carpets, the world didn't stop watching. If anything, the attention only grew. Her absence became a new mystery. What had happened to the star who once lit up every screen? Where had she gone, and why wouldn't she come back? Bardot retreated into a private world, far from the cameras, far from the expectations. But peace didn't come easily. The press still followed her, hungry for any glimpse, any detail. Rumors filled the silence. Some claimed she had lost touch with reality. Others said she was hiding from something darker. And while she tried to rebuild her life in her own way, the weight of her past never stopped pressing down. During this time, she turned her focus to something entirely different: animal rights activism. It became her new passion, a cause that gave her voice meaning again. But even that came with backlash. The world still wanted the Bardot they remembered, not the one who had changed. Her outspoken opinions sparked criticism. Some called her fearless. Others called her controversial. Either way, she was back in the headlines, not as a glamorous actress, but as a woman who refused to stay silent. Behind closed doors, Bardot was still struggling. Fame had left its scars. She spoke openly in rare interviews about depression, isolation, and the toll of having lived under constant judgment. Her relationship with the public remained complex. She was admired, criticized, misunderstood. She had become a symbol once again, but for reasons far removed from the silver screen. And as the years passed, the question remained: had Brigitte Bardot truly escaped the shadow of her own legend, or had she only stepped deeper into it? The world had moved on, but the version of her that people remembered, wild, free, untouchable, never really disappeared. It was still out there, shaping opinions, defining her legacy without her consent. Now, with decades behind her and still more questions than answers, the story is heading toward its most fragile point. Because the deeper we look into Brigitte Bardot's life, the clearer it becomes: this was never just about fame. Something far more personal was slipping away. Just when it seemed Brigitte Bardot had finally carved out a space where she could exist on her own terms, the past came crashing back with new force. Decades after leaving the film industry, Bardot found herself at the center of an entirely different kind of spotlight, one not fueled by glamour or cinema, but by controversy. Her blunt, often unfiltered public statements about politics, society, and the world around her drew intense criticism. The same woman who once captivated millions with her beauty and mystery was now sparking outrage, debate, and division. What many didn't realize was that Bardot had never stopped fighting, just not on the stage people expected. In her view, she was still speaking out, still pushing back against systems that tried to silence her. But to the outside world, the lines between passion and provocation began to blur. Media outlets pounced on every statement, turning her words into headlines that further complicated her image. Was this still the same woman the world had fallen in love with? Or had time and fame transformed her into something entirely different? The more Bardot spoke, the more the conflict deepened. Fans from her early days were torn. Some defended her fiercely, loyal to the woman who once broke all the rules in Hollywood. Others felt betrayed, unable to reconcile the icon they remembered with the figure now making headlines. The disconnect between Bardot the legend and Bardot the person had never been more clear. And through it all, she seemed increasingly isolated, almost defiant in her solitude. But then came an unexpected revelation, one that shifted everything. Private letters and interviews from her earlier years began to surface, painting a much more vulnerable picture of her journey. In these writings, Bardot described moments of deep fear, regret, and longing, emotions the public rarely saw. She spoke of feeling used, discarded, and deeply misunderstood by an industry that profited from her image while ignoring her humanity. These pieces didn't excuse her later actions, but they revealed a far more complex struggle, one between survival and self-expression, between the person she wanted to be and the version the world wouldn't let go of. This second twist, these glimpses into her unguarded thoughts, forced a new wave of attention. Suddenly, people weren't just debating what Bardot had said. They were questioning how much of her story had ever truly belonged to her in the first place. Had she ever had full control over her identity? Or had it always been shaped, distorted, and projected by others? The tension in Bardot's story now reached a boiling point. The legend was no longer just about beauty, rebellion, or fame, it was about the cost of being seen, the weight of being misunderstood, and the lifelong struggle to reclaim one's voice in a world that refuses to listen. And as this truth pushed closer to the surface, it became clear, the story of Brigitte Bardot was far from over. Something even deeper still waited in the shadows, just out of sight. After years of silence, scrutiny, and unexpected turns, Brigitte Bardot finally broke through the noise. In a rare, raw interview late in her life, she sat down not as a movie star, not as an activist, but as a woman tired of being misunderstood. With a calm voice and clear eyes, she spoke openly about the life she never really owned. The fame, the pressure, the labels, they were all heavy costumes she was forced to wear. For the first time, Bardot admitted that she had spent most of her life trying to escape a version of herself that was never real. The myth of Brigitte Bardot had outgrown the woman behind it. She confessed how deeply the image shaped by Hollywood and the media had affected her relationships, her self-worth, and even her sense of reality. She talked about the loneliness of being adored for the wrong reasons, the pain of having her words twisted, and the regret of not being able to undo the damage that years of public misperception had caused. But she also spoke with a strange sense of peace. After decades of running, she had stopped trying to explain herself. She no longer needed the world to understand. For the first time, she seemed truly free. That was the resolution the world never expected, not a grand comeback, not a redemption arc, but a quiet acceptance. Bardot had finally reclaimed her voice, not by fighting the world, but by refusing to be defined by it anymore. She didn't need applause. She didn't need approval. She had learned to live with the silence. But just when it felt like her story had come full circle, a surprising twist emerged. A long-lost journal, believed to have been written during the height of her fame, was discovered in a private collection. Inside were pages of reflection, sketches, and letters never sent. In them, Bardot revealed that she had once planned to direct her own film, a story about a woman trapped by beauty, fame, and the lies people tell to survive. The project was never greenlit. No one had taken her seriously. But the idea had haunted her for years. In the end, Bardot's greatest role may have been the one she was never allowed to play, herself. The discovery of Brigitte Bardot's lost journal offered a final, quiet glimpse into the woman the world never truly saw. In those handwritten pages, she poured out her dreams, her frustrations, and her yearning to tell a story that belonged only to her. It became clear that what Bardot had craved all along wasn't just freedom from the spotlight, but the chance to shape her own narrative. That chance was denied to her, not because she lacked talent, but because the industry only wanted one version of her, the icon, not the artist. As time passed, Bardot remained far from the world of film, but her influence never faded. The conversations around her legacy continued to evolve. Some praised her for breaking barriers. Others criticized her for the bold stances she took in her later years. But one thing was certain: Brigitte Bardot had become much more than a screen siren. She was a symbol of how fame can both elevate and consume, how a woman's image can be owned by everyone except herself. Her life story is a reminder of the cost of celebrity, the way it can erase truth, silence real voices, and leave behind only echoes of what once was. Bardot's choice to walk away wasn't weakness, it was strength. In a world that demanded she always perform, she chose to stop. She chose herself. Today, when people look back at Brigitte Bardot, they often think of the beauty, the rebellion, the headlines. But beyond all that is the deeper story of a woman who tried to rewrite her fate in a world that wouldn't let her. And maybe that unfinished film, the one she never got to make, isn't truly lost. Maybe it lives on in her legacy, in the parts of her story that are only now beginning to be understood. Because in the end, Bardot didn't just lose control of her story, she fought to take it back. And whether the world understood her or not, she left behind more than just a legend. She left behind a lesson that the most powerful role any woman can play is her own.